So Adam Smith saw order in the chaos. What looked like anarchy, Adam Smith was able to say, oh, don't worry, no one has to be in charge. The system will still work if you just allow suppliers and demanders to involve themselves directly with each other in the market. There is an invisible hand that guides society. My self-interest serves you, and your self-interest serves me. But before we get into Adam Smith's invisible hand, let's discuss the problem, why economics needs to be studied at all. The problem is we live in a finite world with limited resources. Let's talk about resources. Resources are one of those terms that means different things to everybody. It's always been overused, and so it's lost its meaning. What we mean by resources in economics are physical things that make other things. So everything that you're touching, the computer or phone screen that you're looking at right now, has a combination of resources built into it that made it. So you can think of resources as your intermediate goods in the production of goods and services for final consumption for some consumers, or more simply, just the inputs into some output. So land, which we really mean natural resources, is one of the key ingredients to most production, although not all. Services, notably, are lacking land, right? If you get a massage, there's not a lot of land involved. Labor is human work effort. That obviously is what goes into a lot of production, almost all production. And then capital, what we mean here is physical capital, machines and buildings, as opposed to financial capital or human capital, which is basically education. Those things are less direct embodiments in they're less directly embodied in production. And then entrepreneurship is the last resource, and that is the category that simply means human work effort, but in a specific direction, like combining resources in new ways, or taking risks, or inventing a new product, right? So entrepreneurship is a very specific kind of labor. It's different enough that we've now given it its own category. These are all limited, right? Although they can grow over time, on any given day, there's a limit to the amount of natural resources and labor, machines, and entrepreneurship that are available for any type of production. But here's the kicker. We, in economics, assume that people's wants are unlimited. We mean here specifically their material wants. So human material wants are unlimited. Can that really be true? Can we really never be satiated? Are we that messed up of a species that, like goldfish, we don't know when to stop eating and we explode? Well, we'll leave that to the philosophers and the psychologists and everybody else to figure out sort of, and also the theologians really, to figure out where that drive comes from. But in economics, we say, well, look at the data. People behave as if they always want more than they have. They always, how do we know? Things like they'll always take a raise when offered. They will always look for discounted products. When things are on sale, people buy more. What is that a sign of? They're trying to get more with their limited money. And so for the most part, most people, most societies, at least in the West, seem to have this strange phenomenon that as incomes grow, consumption also grows. So we've not hit our satiation point yet. All right, why torture that idea? Because that gives us a very powerful predictor. We have a lot of tools now that we can use. If we know that wants are unlimited but resources are limited, we can begin to unpack then how we should go about. Well, that raises the question, first of all, how should we meet the wants that whose wants should we meet, basically? How should we use our resources? And then we can start talking about better and worse ways for societies to organize themselves to do that. And this also gives us the powerful realization that everything has a cost. There is, the famous line in econ goes, there is no such thing as a free lunch. For every choice, there is something that you give up. So opportunity cost is what a lot of life is spent doing, is sort of balancing benefits and costs. So how do we go about doing that? That's where microeconomics can come into play with individual and smaller chunks of the economy, figuring out how that happens. Macro helps to do that sort of in larger scale. How does a society do with its resources? Does it have high unemployment? Does it have any other big problems? Is it doing a poor job matching resources to human wants? And then we can get even bigger and say, what sorts of economic systems do a better job in general of maximizing the satisfaction of human material wants. And that's the assumption that we're going to make. We're going to make that is what society should be doing, is serving the wants of its people, and the wants of its people are generally to get more stuff, to increase standard of living. Now, we could take issue with that. There could be problems with that. There could be environmental costs to that. There could be a debate about whether or not that's really a good thing for society in the long run. But that is how most democratic and also most dictatorial and authoritarian governments have worked. They've promised, even if they didn't mean it, they've always promised to make a better life for citizens, and that usually means higher standards of living. And I'll end with a quick question. Are we smart enough to let the market decide for everything? In a free market capitalist system, there is no authority that decides what gets produced and who gets to buy things, right? Although, admittedly, there always are rules, even in capitalist societies, rules about what can be produced and what cannot be produced. For instance, in the US, horse meat is not allowed, nor is the trade of sex allowed, except perhaps in Nevada. But the question is a larger one. If we rely on the market to decide for society how its resources will be used, are we long-term focused enough to make sure that we don't burn our house down, metaphorically? With climate change and with some of the other issues going on, we begin to raise the question of some of the weaknesses of market systems. Market systems are efficient in serving up what society wants, but does that mean that society will always choose to educate its youth, that it will choose safety nets and some of the other things that most people like to have? Or could you imagine a society like if you ever saw the movie WALL-E, where people are just sitting in comfy chairs, drinking Slurpees and watching entertainment all day long? And what does the future look like if those are the preferences that people choose? Free markets are great, and they're great in reflecting what people want. What do people want is the question.